morning, good afternoon, good evening, trade professionals. We're back with another news roundup from the Simply Trade podcast. Again, thank you for listening and always tuning in. Hope this makes your commute easier. We're going to start off a little different. Actually, Andy and Lalo don't notice, but I'm going to bring a little bit of my Gen Z generation into this because something is trending lately. And I'm going to ask you guys the question and you just have to answer, and then we'll move on with the podcast. How often do you guys think of the Roman Empire?
Occasionally, I mean, you're talking the ancient Roman Empire?
You said occasionally? Okay, I'm going to take that answer occasionally. What about you, Lalo?
Never. No, I'm kidding. I mean, I don't. I mean, why would I think of the Roman Empire? I mean, no. I mean, when I go to church and they talk about how the Romans crucified Jesus, but
Well, and I will say that I think about it as far as in regards to ancient times, and then if you look in a study of the Bible, I mean, there's the reassimilation of the Roman Empire.
Yeah, because there's a thing going on right now on TikTok, and a lot of women ask their boyfriends or brother, sister, husbands, and they ask them, and surprisingly, a lot of guys say often or like, why? Like, how many times? Like, I just thought about it last week. But, like, it's still funny if you say occasionally because as a woman, we don't we don't ever think about the Roman Empire, and somehow men always think about the Roman Empire, and it's just so weird. It's such a weird thing. I'm gonna send you guys the TikTok so you guys can get familiar, and if you are wondering what I'm talking about, look it up. It's a real thing, and maybe ask your significant other if they think about the Roman Empire, and then let us know on LinkedIn or wherever. Anyways, okay, moving on. Thank you for that. So we're going to the first article. So Europe probes China's electric car subsidies as imports soar. This is interesting to me, especially because we have talked about the differences of car export and import, specifically you, Andy, with the tariffs and stuff. Now China is really making a run for it. So I want to know what your stand is, if you think that the investigation will find something. If not, what will happen with the US and EU market of EV cars?
Well, they're having a hard time to compete now if you're manufacturing. So what? All right. So what's that issue? Is Europe is looking to see how much the Chinese government basically is subsidizing the EV manufacturing. Many times the government will, the local government, the state government, or even the federal will provide tax incentives, as it's called. So it'll delay or waive taxes that would normally be paid in lieu of the jobs. Now, there's an offset there and whatnot. Well, that in itself would be considered a subsidy. And so there's the scenario there, is that not an unfair scenario where you're trying to now compete against others that are in the industry? What Europe is looking at is that China is giving their manufacturers an unfair advantage by subsidizing their costs and lowering the cost of EVs. And there you go. So that's right now. It's difficult for them to compete against the Chinese.
No, I understand. And then I'm going through the whole article, and then it states that the European Union applies a duty of 10% on cars imported from China, and the United States puts 27.5. So why is this a big issue for the European cars rather than the US? Like, does the US have a big issue with this too, or like what? Because obviously this article is tailored to Europe, the European side, but what about the US side?
Well, again, you've got more than just what they're aggregating in that is also the what's called the Chinese tariffs, or the 301 tariffs on top of it. So it's more than just on just EVs. It's goods from China are getting an extra tariff put on them. In the U.S., China has full access to it, even with the 301 tariffs. But if you take US goods and try and go to China, or you could take European goods that are manufactured and ship them to China, There are tariffs that are high. There are non tariff trade barriers that are put up. China has not opened up their markets to the world. This is just another commodity where Europe, in this case, is investigating it and saying, is China not playing fair in the sandbox? In a world driven by innovation and global connectivity, there's one name that stands out above the rest: Schultz Trade Law. With over 30 years providing legal and consulting services to Fortune 500 companies, Schultz Trade Law knows the challenges that businesses face in navigating the complex landscape of international trade. The legal and regulatory hurdles can impede growth and drain resources. But fear not, because Schultz Trade Law has the solution. At Schultz Trade Law, they've harnessed their vast knowledge of real-world trade challenges and legal expertise to create a seamless experience for businesses engaged in international trade. Their team of legal experts know how to streamline import and export compliance, resolve trade disputes, and optimize global supply chain operations. Learn more at schultztradelaw.com, where legal expertise leads the way to global success.
Moving on to Article 2. This is about CBP, interoperability, standards test to improve supply chain transparency. So, the ability of computer systems or software to exchange and make use of information. Transparency is the key of this update and test by CBP. Mostly, this article is talking about the pipeline, oil, and steel supply chain. Now, if you're in this industry, should you be excited for this kind of transparency that they're kind of bringing to the front? And how do you think it can help people in this industry? Also, will there be new technology they have to make themselves more familiar with this transparency?
This is more like, I guess, by transparency, they're talking about sharing data between all the different agencies within trade. So it's not necessarily like they're going to be saying, "Oh, we discovered company A is doing something really bad, and look at what they're doing." That's it's not that kind of transparency, which I'm thinking you may be thinking that.
Yeah. No, I was just thinking that I mean, in transparency, I thought it was more of like seeing more of an understanding of the industry, of how everything is working. But if they need new technology um to work for the industry to work with that.
Yeah, well, part of the problem that is that the private sector sometimes doesn't understand why the government may not even be talking to each other. Like you submit. We just talked about that with FDA, right, Andy? Earlier in this month, we talked about how you might be doing an import and customs gets a hit that requires FDA, and they're not sharing data. Like there's not that transparency or that anyway. So you need to figure out. You now need to go and deal with another agency, which you should anyway, but it's like you're repeating the process over and over because there's just not that sharing and transparency of data through that supply chain so that you can then be able to be more efficient. Sometimes you just think to yourself, well, I'm coming through the border or the port of entry, and I'm uh, I'm assuming everything will get taken care of at that time. Oh, and it's not necessarily true. So
Think of the data that is out and is available for the government and inspectors and all. It's coming from different sources, so it could be in different formats, in different languages, whatever. And this is a programming languages, that is, or in different formats for it. The point being is, as the data comes through, what they were testing out is the ability to take all of that and basically make it available in a platform that the CBP then can look at it from a cargo security perspective. I think it's fantastic. There's multiple data elements that are coming to them at different times before arrival. It actually should work out well from a standpoint of the good corporate citizens that are putting forth the effort to do what they need to do. This is a way for customs and other agencies to become more proficient in analyzing the information before arrival, make their decision whether they want to examine it or release it and move through so that basically the good corporate citizens and their shipments can move through efficiently. And then the CBP and others, appropriate officials, can apply their expertise on shipments that require more attention.
Well, that sounds great. Even for the businesses, seems like it makes their lives a little bit easier and more efficient, which I guess we always strive to in the trade world. I would believe so. Next up, we have actually, this one is kind of a review of something we talked about before. It has kind of developed even more. It is about the Panama Canal Authority vessel transits may be reduced if drought persists. So, this is an article written by Lori Ann LaRocco, and I've seen her on LinkedIn many times. Probably would love to have her on the podcast. She writes about the most important things in trade. Lately, she's been writing on this specific topic. She releases stuff every week, updates and stuff. So I just want to hear your thoughts on how this affects the trade and processing. We've kind of talked about it before, but now in depth, what is happening and where are we going with this, and how should they react? How should businesses react in this situation?
Well, due to the drought in Central America, is what's happening is that it's causing water levels, if you will, obviously to lower. What it mainly is doing is causing the when a ship or a vessel goes through the locks of the Panama Canal, it's taking longer to fill up or drain those locks as they move through the channel. So it bottom line is making the um, transit time through the canal longer, and as such, it's backing up ships on either side of that. So now, again, we're at a scenario where people, if you're in logistics, in logistics and transportation, you need to be looking at this situation where, again, the Panama Canal was a viable solution to avoid some of the delays on the western seaboard of the U.S. Unfortunately, now it looks like now that the western ports seem to be current, and the Panama Canal is the one that's backing up.
It's global warming. Let's just like act. That's not even a question. Okay, going on. Going on.
So, no, anyway, it's just something you have to deal with. It's added cycle times or transit times to your if you're running through the Panama Canal.
Well, at this point, do you think they should already look at rerouting it?
Yeah, they should have already been doing that, I guess, for to an extent. You know what I mean? Because I mean, if your ships are delayed, I think it's at 5.8 days or something like that. I think
Yeah,
that's what
and
I
I
read.
think some already 10. I'm not sure, but I saw 10 too in
It
that
said
article.
wait times of anyway. Yeah, I mean, of course. I mean, if I'm gonna ship something next month, yeah, I'm gonna reserve my spot. But if you're coming, yeah, 5.8 waiting period. So almost 6 days waiting period. I mean, that's a lot of money and resources to waste. That's you can make that up, I guess. But the problem is right now, I guess not to throw a wrench in all this, but right now is hurricane season, and as you know, the East Coast is just getting hammered with hurricanes right now, and so that is also a factor that you need to consider on the East Coast.
Yeah. Ah, that's terrible. That, you know what? It's funny because you just said about resources and stuff. So like obviously this affects the people that plan the entire thing, the logistics of it, but it also goes into the finance department because at this point you're spending much more money, and then you're money that you didn't calculate for. Well, those were the three articles we have chosen for this week. We'll end it with a fun fact. Um which is actually by Lalo. He sent me one. So he said the United States has reported consistent trade deficits since the mid 1970s, but there are a few countries with which the United States has a trade surplus. In 2022, those countries included the Netherlands, which I would have never thought, Hong Kong, Brazil, Singapore, and Australia. Doesn't the Netherlands look so not right?
No, it does. What that means is that there's more, we are shipping more to them than they are shipping to us. So that totally makes sense.
I know, but I can't even think of I don't know why, I just don't to me, it just seems so weird that the Netherlands and the United S it's so weird to me that they even interact. I don't know why I think of this, but
Yeah, it's a small country too, and the U.S. They're buying more U.S. goods than
which is I don't know why I can't understand that. My European brain can't get that because when I go there, I just feel like it's so weird.
that's what the U.S. is doing. It's a scenario where U.S. is buying and importing more goods than the U.S. sells or exports.
There's only one European country on there, and I'm just so confused why only one? Like, why one? No, Netherlands surprises me, and the Brazil surprises you. And Netherlands is the highest even. 38.3 billion.
Oh, by the way, fun fact came from Jen Diaz, our attorney friend in Miami. So I don't want to take credit for it. When we're recording this, it started, but by the time we air, it's this past Friday, so September 15th. Hispanic Heritage Month started, so Viva la Raza. Happy Hispanic Heritage Month. Again, that's a
Wow, Lalo knows all the days, all of them. Always remembers everything. So kind. I love that. Well, again, we have all ICPA interviews up on LinkedIn, or they're getting up. They're about to be done. We're still posting into the weekend as well. And other than that, I have nothing more. Thank you for everyone that's listening. And we will be back next week with much more fun. So thank you, Lalo. Thank you, Andy. And goodbye.
Thank you very much for joining us. Simply Trade is brought to you by the generous contributions of Global Training Center. You can follow the show and GTC on LinkedIn or Twitter and other social networks. Make sure you check out the show notes in the description for a full rundown of today's show with all the important links. Also, make sure that you share this with a friend and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. We really like hearing from you. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to rate and review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the show or would like to sponsor Simply Trade or suggest any topic you would like for us to discuss, please contact us via email at simplytrade@globaltrainingcenter.com, or you can DM us on Twitter at simplytradepod. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Happy trading. Simply Trade is not a law firm or an advisor. The topics and discussions conducted by Simply Trade hosts and guests should not be considered and is not intended to substitute legal advice. You should seek appropriate counsel for your own situations. These conversations and information are directed towards listeners in the United States for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only and should not be substituted for legal advice. No listener or viewer of this podcast should act or refrain from acting on the basis of information on this podcast without first seeking legal advice from counsel. Information on this podcast may not be up to date depending on the time of publishing and the time of viewership. The content of this posting is provided as is. No representations are made that the content is error-free. The views expressed in or through this podcast are those of the individual speakers, not those of their respective employers or Global Training Center as a whole. All liability with respect to actions taken or not taken based on the contents of this podcast are hereby expressly disclaimed.